Good morning and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this 20th day of December 2022. And hey, it's a beautiful day right here in Brisbane, 23 degrees and sunny. Well, let's get on with the news today. And with the news after that, we today have the Daily India Report. But just as a notice that a lot of programs from today onwards will be changed with the timing until in January, as the real estate update one, we might not have one tomorrow, but we will resume in January. So also with the Daily India Report, our Delhi office will be closed soon as well until January. So we will have some sort of live coming on, but it might be on a slightly different pattern. Well, right now let's get on with the news and take a look at Penny Wong's very, very historical visit to Beijing.
Well, success is the mere act of setting foot on Chinese soil, given that that's not happened in 4 years for an Australian minister. So that in itself is a success, is a breakthrough. I think what we can hope for is a more professional, calmer, less fraught day-to-day bilateral relationship between Australia and China. That in itself is already a breakthrough after 2 years of quite a bit of tumult and being in China's diplomatic deep freeze. Now, in terms of concrete deliverables that the foreign minister can expect to achieve in Beijing, I think we've got to manage our expectations there. These are early steps still in the stabilization of the relationship, not quite the normalization, or it's not a full reset yet, but I think we'll have to wait and see. Of course, many will be on the lookout for any easing of the economic measures against certain sectors that China has imposed on Australia, and perhaps also the two Australians detained in China. But we'll have to see. I mean, the ball is in China's court now. I think Australia has illustrated that it is willing to engage productively without necessarily giving up the ground, and we'll see what happens.
Well, you've mentioned a number of things that Australia wants, lifting of trade restrictions. I think $20 billion is the effect of those restrictions on trade. What does China want from Australia in these negotiations as well?
Well, I think that the key is to understand that for China, this is not just about Australia. I mean, we tend to think about China a lot. It occupies the headlines in Australia, but from a Beijing standpoint, Australia is a small player within a much bigger global stage. And the thing to note here is that President Xi has been on a bit of a charm offensive since the party congress that anointed him for a third term as supreme leader, as it were. And he is trying his best, I think, at following a really terrible year for China in terms of a slowing economy, in terms of COVID-0 exacting a terrible social and economic toll on China. And then now with the U-turn, with the essentially letting COVID rip through Chinese society, that's also creating huge turmoil. And then also think about the fact that Russia has committed huge blunders in Ukraine. That's had, I would say, a secondary reputational effect on China. So the sort of reputation for efficiency that China had 3 years ago in the lead up to the pandemic has been somewhat tarnished, and I think it was increasingly feeling quite isolated and fallible on the world stage, and therefore it is toning down on its wolf warrior diplomacy and trying to signal that it is willing to re-engage with the world. That is an opportunity that Australia should seize. The art of diplomacy is to try to find your moments to make breakthroughs, but I think we need to sort of see this in a larger global context and not just through the prism of an Australia-China bilateral relationship.
From what you're saying there, it feels like trade negotiations, trade talk is probably the easiest thing to strike a deal on. Maybe that won't be announced in one meeting, but that's an easier topic to discuss. Less so when it comes to Australians detained in China. Do you think that actually gets raised? And also China's human rights record, something that Australia has been quite strong of in the past. Does that even get talked about?
Look, I'm sure these things will feature on the agenda. Whether that results in China taking steps in the direction we want is another question. On trade sanctions easing, it is possible to think of at least a tactical relaxation in some of those measures. I think the thing that we have to remember, the lessons we draw from the past 2 years, is that we need to plan for a future of uneasy economic interdependence with China. Even after 2 years of informal sanctions, China remains our largest trade partner, and the sectors that survived those measures the best were not ones in which Australia is dependent on China, but where there is mutual interdependence. That sort of economic enmeshment is key to the picture, and China needs us, or needs Australian commodities as much as we need China, and that is the basis for a very realistic, very pragmatic relationship. I think there's recognition on both sides that interdependence will have to continue and hopefully form some basis of cooperation. Now, exactly how that eventuates, we will see. I mean, China is also looking at Australia to see where it stands on possible accession into the Trans-Pacific Partnership Deal, the CPTPP. It's quite a mouthful, but that is another prize that China is eyeing. It's not something that Australia, I think, will concede to until we've seen much more progress on other fronts, trade sanctions and those detainees at the very minimum. But look, the point is these are two parties that are at the same table, having the same discussion. That in itself is a big breakthrough. I think the foreign minister, given how calm and measured she is in fact very temperamentally suited to dealing with the paradoxes of the relationship, this competitive interdependence that we have with China. That's here to stay. We're going to have to walk and chew gum at the same time, and this government has done quite a good job, early days, but quite a good job at succeeding at that for now.
Quite a comprehensive report there, and of course within the business circles as well, there's a lot of talk going on about this visit and what it might mean and what it would entail. Well, right now, there is a call for industry-wide first aid training for truck drivers.
Is this something that drivers then are familiar with, that they're often the first on the scene of an accident?
Look, absolutely, Ros. So most of the research was done by the Northern Territory Association. As you said, 70% of truck drivers surveyed were first on scene. In some cases, they were first on scene for more than 30 minutes, in majority of cases actually, and in some instances they're first on scene for up to 3 hours, particularly in our remote and very remote areas. So one of the things that was identified is that what can we do to upskill the drivers, to give them those basic skills so that they can better attend to the situation at hand. And that was really a project that we're trying to push and roll out nationally now.
Okay, so what level of medical training or first aid do truck drivers usually have before they might get extra training, Cam?
Yeah, so good question. So the majority of truck drivers will have a basic first aid course, which generally is PowerPoint delivered these days. What we've done with this course is we've actually tried to shrink it down into a condensed course. We've taken elements from what the Defence have learnt in Afghanistan and Iraq, but also elements from what Queensland Police have done with a program which actually won the World Police Safety Award in 2019 and has now documented saving over, 90 lives. But in addition to that, which is really around that hemorrhage control and stopping the bleed, it's the elements of what do you do when you arrive on scene. So one of the things, the problems in remote and very remote areas of Australia is that the mobile phone coverage, for example in WA, is only 24% of the geography. It's advertised as 99% of the population, but geographically, 75% of the state isn't covered by a mobile phone network. So how do the drivers relay the message? What do? If it's increasing number of hybrid and electric vehicles, not so much out there, but they are increasing, there are safety risks in charging in and trying to save life there. And there's also that, how do they look after the others that are involved in the site safety? But the most important element is one of the most important elements is how do they look after themselves? So the research conducted by Louise Bellato, who's my Northern Territory counterpart, is that only 1 in 5 drivers will ever tell their employer that they were actually involved in a fatality. The majority of them, 80% of them, they may have been at the scene for 3 hours, but then afterwards they'll continue on their journey. So how do we give them awareness of the mental health support that's available to them?
Yeah, how does it affect drivers then who come across these traumatic scenes?
Look, it's a resilient industry, and the women and men out there who drive out there in our industry are tough, reliant people. But no one's immune from mental health issues. One of the problems that we have culturally is how do you break that down? How do you give them greater awareness of the support mechanisms, the awareness in themselves of where the mental health triggers are? So that's also embedded in the program. So the program was sort of stolen a bit of an idea from Defence and Police. It's an immersive program. It's hands-on. Go through everything they need to do, because that's the best way for truck drivers to learn.
And some drivers, I understand, already have had some of this extra training. What do they say about it?
Look, I'll quote one of the truck drivers who've been driving for 40-odd years in the Territory. His response to Louise when they did the pilot program was, well, we should have done this 40 years ago, which in truck driver terms is a commendation. But we've generally had really good feedback from the truck drivers where the pilot's been conducted.
Cam Damasi, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ross.
Thank you very much for that. Another very comprehensive report. Well, right now, moving on, a Canberra man has been charged with stealing a lot of money from elderly women.
Police estimate Max Davidson stole up to $130,000 from his friend while he was her carer. He's been charged with 12 counts of theft. He's also facing charges of cultivating a commercial quantity of cannabis after police say a search of his home uncovered a grow house. Court documents reveal the alleged victim had no family, and when her health failed, she came to rely on Mr. Davidson for help, allowing him to use her credit card to pay for necessities. Police say when her health deteriorated in 2018, Mr. Davidson gave up his job and became her carer. But it's alleged he used the opportunity to benefit himself, spending tens of thousands of dollars of her money on lottery tickets and thousands on tyres. During 2018, the woman was admitted to Calvary Hospital several times, and when she returned home towards the end of the year, she noticed some of her furniture was missing. Mr. Davidson is also accused of convincing the woman to make him the beneficiary of her will and to give him the power of attorney over her affairs. Prosecutors opposed bail, expressing concern about the woman's safety if Mr. Davidson was released. But Magistrate Beth Campbell reminded the court police had dragged their feet. I think it's a little bit rich that it took 4 years for it to end up in court. The court documents show most of the alleged thefts took place in 2018 and that the friendship had ended when the woman agreed to lend Mr. Davidson $500 and he withdrew $1,000, although he did pay the money back. Police say when he was questioned, he said he'd saved the woman's life 3 times. Mr. Davidson has been granted bail, but will have to report to police daily. Elizabeth Byrne, ABC News, Canberra.
Well, there you go. When a matter of trust and faith, and we've had this kind of stories before as well. And of course, the Law Society has warned us as well that be very, very careful, in signing your will or giving a power of attorney to carers and other people whom you know, love and trust, and they abuse that power. That is just all right, now let's go to Fiji and take a look at the election situation there.
Rebecca Sharkey, the 2022 election in Fiji saw 2 former coup leaders squaring off against each other. The multinational observer group, of which you are co-chair, reported no significant polling irregularities, but still reflected concerns from 2018 about controls over the media, the lack of laws governing the conduct of MPs. Could you give us a flavour of how different an election campaign it is in Fiji to one we might experience in Australia?
It is quite a different election in the sense that when you land in Fiji you wouldn't necessarily know that there's an election, compared to in South Australia where we have, every Stobie poll plastered. But the job of the multinational observer group was really just to observe the election. So they were on the ground from the day the writs were issued on the 31st of October and attending both pre-poll, and of course you've got to remember Fiji, it has hundreds of islands, so getting out to you know, all of those places that have polling stations. There were over 2,000 polling stations, and really making sure that that the conduct of the election was transparent and accessible for all Fijians.
Well, how did it feel on the ground? I mean, there were reports that it was quite a tense election.
I must say, look, there were over 90 observers from 16 nations that were part of the multinational observer group, and they basically went out to, you know, every part of Fiji. And for those who haven't been to Fiji, the main island, and in fact all of the islands tend to be quite mountainous, lots of remote villages right around. So look, certainly I found in my surveys, and we all completed surveys for every single polling booth we attended, that the election was quite methodical. That people lined up peaceably. I mean, you know, it was a really calm and peaceful election.
What was the feedback you were getting from average Fijians as you went around the polling booths about the significance of this election? Frank Bainimarama had been in power for 16 years after staging a coup in 2006. Did they regard this election as a really big turning point?
Look, I just got a sense that people were looking forward to having their vote. It was a very high turnout, so it was 68%, and you know, for a country, and many countries around the world do not have compulsory voting, and given you know, given the remoteness in many locations, I thought that was quite a high turnout, higher than perhaps what was, you know, what was predicted.
It is a pretty strange election from an Australian perspective, in that we've got these two people who've run coups against the government of the day, contesting against each other. How confident are you that that result, when it finally comes, will be accepted, and that that period of coups and counter-coups is over for Fiji?
So, look, I got a real sense of calm on the day of the election and the days after. There was some anxiety, both from the political parties and from the general public, with not the vote counting, because that was a very manual 24-hour-a-day expedition following the election, but there was provisional voting on the night, and the tally of those results was then uploaded into an app, and there was some challenges around the veracity of that data. The app was taken down, but look, that was really, I guess, what was most concerning to people in Fiji was around, and perhaps getting a greater understanding of how the process was, because it was an entirely manual count. I was there at the National Count Centre, and then in the tally room after. So it was a very, you know, laborious process. As I said, it went for essentially 24 hours in the day until early on Sunday morning, when the final result was announced. And I guess it's, you know, it's my hope as a member of Parliament and someone who has a great interest in politics, that any nation that goes through an election has a peaceful transition if there is a change of government.
Rebecca Sharkey, thanks for your
In 5 days of waiting, and we're told that we will have to wait another 14 days as the management board, which is a 43-member of Indigenous representatives from across Fiji, will decide for the 3 candidates from their party who actually won a seat whether or not they will go into coalition with the Fiji First Party, who of course formed the previous government, or the People's Alliance and National Federation Party, a coalition of opposition parties who have now claimed the majority of the seats at the end of these elections. What we're told is that there are non-negotiable terms, or demands rather, on the table that SEDELPA, the former leading opposition party, has given both of these suitors of theirs, asking for their partnership in
this coalition. Amongst these non-negotiables is the creation of a Fijian embassy in Jerusalem, the protection of indigenous land rights, better economic and educational opportunities for indigenous people. And so what we're finding out is that in the next few days, this 43-member board of indigenous representatives will look at the proposals from both these parties and decide which side their three candidates will go with and which government in turn the people of Fiji will get at the end of 14 days, Joe.
And how are Fijians feeling about the election? And can you tell us what major policy differences there would be between the two major parties that this party in the middle decided to go with?
Well, the mood on the ground now in Fiji is very calm and very peaceful. Almost 58% of the voters who actually turned out in these elections have voted for the opposition parties, which numbers about 546. And so what that means is that people want a change. SEDELPA, who has been in opposition for 8 years, will now have to decide between the party they had did not work very well with for the past 8 years and struggled to compete against in the parliament, or a party that is made up of their former leader, Sitiveni Rabuka, who of course now heads the People's Alliance Party. So it's a major difference of philosophies. But what SEDELPA has told us, surprisingly, overnight, is that their view is the things that they want for the indigenous people of this country can be served by either party. It's which one of these parties will give them the power within the next government to make these election promises happen is how they will decide which way to go.
And I noticed that the first thing you mentioned as the non-negotiable demands is an embassy in Jerusalem. Why is that such a big issue in Fiji?
Joe, Fiji is a largely Christian population, and the Christian people of Fiji have an interesting relationship with Jerusalem. There is the proximity to being close to the Holy Land that a lot of Christians hold dearly, and so this has come through in the voter base that SEDELPA enjoys. Now, SEDELPA is largely an Itoke Christian conservative party, and so their voters have asked these specific things, and it seems that the embassy in Jerusalem is one term that William Ngavoka, the head of SEDELPA, is unwilling to part with when a new coalition agreement is put together by the end of the week.
Hopefully that they have some results coming out towards the end of the week, and as we know, it's sort of a hung parliament at the moment. Well, right now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to go to our daily India report.
Welcome to the Daily India Report that brings you reports, interviews, features and more on India and the Indian diaspora. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has reassured the nation that India is moving forward with a new approach in the field of sports and will organize events like the FIFA World Cup in India soon.
As Argentina played their historic FIFA World Cup final against France in Qatar, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on December 18th assured the country that we would organize an event like the FIFA World Cup in India. The Prime Minister was addressing a gathering in Meghalaya. He said, today the teams playing in the Qatar final are foreign countries, but I can say with assurance that we will be organizing an event like the FIFA World Cup in India and will cheer for the tricolour. The same was tweeted by the official Twitter account of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Prime Minister Modi was in Meghalaya where he launched various developmental projects. It is a coincidence that when the Football World Cup final is happening, I am addressing football fans on a football ground, he said while addressing a crowd. On one side, the world's largest football tournament is happening and we are initiating developmental works from a football ground, the Prime Minister said. Addressing the gathering, the Prime Minister also mentioned that the central government is moving forward with a new approach in the field of sports. He stated, we are moving forward with a new approach in the field of sports. Northeast has the first sports university in India. Northeast is also getting the gift of multi-purpose halls, football grounds and athlete tracks with 90 such projects.
The most powerful stealth-guided missile destroyer built in India, INS Mormugao, was commissioned in the Indian Navy on December 18th by Defence Minister Rajnath Singh.
Indigenously built stealth-guided missile destroyer INS Mormugao, one of the most powerful warships built in India, got commissioned on December 18th in Mumbai in the presence of Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. Speaking at the ceremony, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said INS Mormugao is evidence of India's excellence in warship design and development, adding that it is among the most powerful and technologically advanced warships. INS Mormugao is the second of the 4 Visakhapatnam class destroyers of Project 15B, indigenously designed by the Indian Navy's in-house organization, Warship Design Bureau, and constructed by Mazagon Dock Shipbuilders Limited, Mumbai. Named after the historic port city of Goa, Mormugao INS Mormugao is 163 meters long and 17 meters wide and has a displacement of 7,400 tons and a maximum speed of 30 knots. The warship is packed with sophisticated state-of-the-art weapons and sensors such as surface-to-surface missiles and surface-to-air missiles. INS Mormugao comes with a modern surveillance radar that provides target data to the gunnery weapon systems on board.
In a stern reply to Pakistan's nuclear threat, Union Minister of State for External Affairs V. Muralidharan has said that India will not back away from any threat and has the capacity to deal with it.
A day after Pakistan's senior leader threatened India with nuclear war, Union Minister of State for External Affairs V. Muralidharan said that India has the capacity to deal with nuclear threats. He said India has the capacity to deal with all these threats. India is not a nation that will back away from anyone's threats. India has the capacity to deal with all these threats. No one should have any doubts about that. On December 17th, Pakistan People's Party leader Shazia Mari said during a press conference, India should not forget that Pakistan has an atom bomb. Our nuclear status is not meant for keeping silent. We will not back down if the need arises. If you keep making allegations against Pakistan again and again, Pakistan cannot keep listening silently. This will not happen, she added. Mari's comments came as a defensive move after the country's Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari labelled Prime Minister Narendra Modi as the butcher of Gujarat. Meanwhile, in a befitting reply to Bilawal's remarks, Muralidharan said, Bilawal Bhutto's remark reflects the culture of his country. The foreign minister has insulted his country. India and Pakistan are neighbours. We want all neighbours to be cultured. But unfortunately, such people are ruling Pakistan. This is the most unfortunate and reprehensible remark to ever come from a Pakistan leader. On Bhutto's remarks, External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Arindam Bagchi had said, these comments are a new low, even for Pakistan.
India's Minister of Railways has announced that Indian Railways will roll out Vande Metro trains for the middle class and the poor by December 2023.
Minister of Railways Ashwini Vaishnaw announced on December 18 that the Railways is producing the Vande Metro train to replace the ones created in the 1950s and 1960s. He said, these Vande Metro trains will be manufactured in such large numbers that across the country, the trains which were of the 1950s and 1960s designs will all be replaced. The Union Minister emphasized that the middle class and the poor would receive service from these Vande Metro trains and that the high-end clientele was not the main focus. The Prime Minister wants railways to make a very big transformative change in every Indian's life. He also informed that the first hydrogen train to be built and designed entirely domestically would debut in December 2023. We are designing and the design should be out anywhere by May or June. We are designing a world-class Vande Metro which will be a great leap forward, Vaishnaw said. He added, the design process is already going on and we should be able to roll out the first hydrogen train in the country by December 2023. According to the Union Minister, the railways are developing the Vande Bharat 3 plan which will include sleeper class. These trains would be used for lengthy trips as well.
Mumbai-based Mrs. Sargam Kaushal has won the Mrs. World 2022 pageant as she brings back the coveted crown after 21 years.
India's Sargam Kaushal was named Mrs. World 2022, beating contestants from 63 countries to bring the title back to India after 21 years. Mrs. World 2021, Sherilyn Ford of the US presented the crown to Mumbai-based Mrs. Kaushal at a ceremony held at Westgate Las Vegas Resort and Casino on December 17th. Mrs. Polynesia was named the first runner-up, followed by Mrs. Canada as the second runner-up. In a post on its official Instagram page, the Mrs. India pageant announced the winner and said, the long wait is over, it's after 21 years we have the crown back. On her win, Mrs. Kaushal said, we've got the crown back after 21 to 22 years. I'm so excited. Love you India, love you world. Aditi Govitrikar, the actor model who brought the Mrs. India crown to India in 2001, also shared a congratulatory message. Tagging Kaushal, Govitrikar wrote, heartiest congratulations at Sargam 3 at Mrs. India Inc. So happy to have been part of the journey. It was time the crown came back after 21 years. For the final round, Kaushal wore a pink center-slit glittery gown designed by Bhavna Rao and was mentored for the runway by pageant expert and model Alicia Raut.
Dense fog has engulfed India's national capital region as the mercury dropped and the air quality index went into the very poor category on December 19th.
A dense fog enveloped the national capital on December 19th, leading to poor visibility across places. Pollution levels in the national capital dropped to the very poor category in the morning, with an overall air quality index of 339 at 8 a.m. The air quality recorded across the capital fell under the very poor category. The air quality level in Noida dropped to the severe category with an AQI of 424. Gurugram recorded an AQI of 312 in the very poor category. Due to the dense fog, the Delhi airport has issued a passenger advisory and said that there has been no impact on flight operations. As per the current advisory, it wrote, low visibility procedures are in progress at Delhi airport. However, there has been no impact on flight operations. Passengers are requested to contact the airline concerned for updated flight information. On December 18, the minimum temperature settled at 6.2 degrees Celsius, 2 notches below the season's average. The relative humidity oscillated between 87% and 63%, the meteorological department said. Apart from Delhi, a thick layer of fog also engulfed Odisha's capital Bhubaneswar after the mercury dropped. The fog resulted in reduced visibility in the region and the vehicles were seen with headlights on even during the day. The visibility has been very low due to heavy fog in several states for the last couple of days. The IMD has also predicted rain in Tamil Nadu from 19 December. Light to moderate rain is likely to occur in a few places with isolated thunderstorms and lightning over Tamil Nadu. The weather department has predicted heavy rains at isolated places over Thoothukudi, Ramanathapuram, Puddukottai, Sivaganga, Thanjavur, Tiruvarur, Nagapattinam, Mayiladuthurai and Kudalur districts of Tamil Nadu and Karaikal on 21st December.
India has defeated host Bangladesh in the first test by 188 runs, bowling out the Bangla Tigers for 324 runs.
Indian cricket team defeated Bangladesh by 188 runs on day 5 of their first test match at the Zahur Ahmed Chaudhary Stadium in Chattogram on December 18th. The visitors bowled out the hosts for 324 in the first session on day 5. Earlier, a debut century by Zakir Hasan on day 4 had set the game for a final day thriller. Zakir slammed 100 runs off 224 balls, packed with 13 fours and a 6. On day 5, Shakib Al Hasan resumed batting with Mehdi Hasan, but the latter lost his wicket early. Bangladesh added 52 runs in 11.2 overs in the morning session and lost 4 wickets in the process after resuming the day on 272 for 6 while chasing an improbable 513 for a win. Shakib led a solo show, registering a half-century en route 108 ball 84, including 6 sixes and 6 fours. But after the fall of his wicket, Bangladesh lost their remaining wickets quickly. For India, Akshar Patel grabbed 4 wickets in Bangladesh's second innings and Kuldeep Yadav took 3 scalps. Mohammad Siraj, Umesh Yadav and R. Ashwin bagged a dismissal each. India's win in the first test meant a 1-0 lead in the 2-match series. The second and final test starts on December 22nd in Mirpur.
Sending his fans on a joyous ride before the Christmas holidays, actor Salman Khan has unveiled a teaser of his song Ved Lavle with Ritesh Deshmukh from the latter's Marathi film Ved.
On Ritesh Deshmukh's birthday, Bollywood's Bhai Salman Khan took to his Instagram handle and teased fans with a glimpse of his special appearance in Ritesh's upcoming film Ved. He will be joining Ritesh on the song Ved Lavle. The film marks Ritesh Deshmukh's directorial debut in Marathi films and also has Janelia D'Souza playing the female lead. Sharing a sneak peek from the song, Salman Khan wrote Bhaucha birthday aahe at Ritesh D gift to banta hai. Enjoy. The song features Salman and Ritesh matching movies with a hook step of the dance. The Mumbaiya ambience of the song promises a peppy track with Salman jumping from a balcony and landing on a truck to sitting on a cycle. The full song will be out soon. Ved is slated to release on December 30th.
That's all for this bulletin of the Daily India Report.
And thank you very much, Ankita, for that report. And as I said, ladies and gentlemen, that from here on, some of the segments might be interrupted because everyone's going on holidays. Well, right now, it's time to say goodbye from this segment. It's been wonderful having your company today, as usual, and we'll try and bring to you as many shows as possible, but please stay tuned to find out some of the shows which might be delayed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now, it's time to say goodbye.